Hello, I'm Martin House, CEO and founder of Tech4, and I'm here with the award-winning master projection designer, Bart Kresa, to learn about the art of creating transformative, immersive experiences. Hello, Bart.
Hello, how are you?
I'm jealous actually, because you look like you've got beautiful setting and beautiful weather, and you can see from my window behind me, it's pitch black and cold here in England. So you've got the better end of the deal. It's good to be talking with you.
Yes, so nice talking to you too.
So just to help the audience, you refer to yourself, your art, as architectural projection. Can you just give us a bit of a background into what that entails?
That goes back about 30 years, when I was in the school of photography, and I learned about that projection technology, which really interested me to a point where sort of my whole life transformed, focused on that. And then in 1995, I was invited to be a part of Arte Multivisione, which is used to be a sort of like a gathering of artists, people from around the world interested in projection. And then I learned about, architectural projection design. It blew my mind. And then since then I have been, creating installations. And then in 1995, maybe it was on a gallery level, very small. Then there was a period of working in clubs, the music, and then moved on to theme parks, and then concerts, working with Coldplay and the Pope. And it's sort of, I never really imagined that I would end up where I am today, or where I was last year. Maybe that's more correct, because like we can talk about it later, like things kind of flipped upside down, and then we started focusing on a different, type of work this year. But like last year, we end up being a studio having designed the biggest attractions, in the world. So very, very, I don't know, humble. I don't know what to say about it. It's just, I think I'm just lucky that I was able to create that team of people that is able to deliver those experiences, for the audiences.
Is your background more creative or more technical, or is it a blend of both? How did you end up here from your own experience?
It's kind of blend of both, because I started off as a musician, so I went through 16 years of classical music training. Then I went through a few years of school of photography. And then when I was about 20 and I came to the United States, I totally, went through a period of fascinations with like tools, mechanical devices, things like that. Then I went through a period of working with engineers, actually designing and creating custom devices for me by soldering. This was like beginning of the end of 90s, I think. And fascination with the software, programming tracks from Datatone, which led me to be one of tracks wizards. And our type of work requires both, the technical and creative. And it's just because, like when you design something for a screen, that industry has created standards, and then you don't have to worry about like the brightness of the screens, the resolution. This is kind of set for you. But in our type of work, every time we do a project, there's like a different amount of pixels, we talk about pixel density per project. So it's like, that doesn't have, our industry doesn't have standards like, for example, the film industry.
Yes, an open format, and every project is its own format, I guess.
Mm-hmm. That's true.
So maybe, I don't know how much you want to share, but in terms of the process of, so you're brought in on a project, or you're invited to explore a project, and the projection design involves projecting pixels and therefore content onto typically large physical objects, buildings in the main, I guess. What do you do then? You say, I can see a big building. How do you decide what you're going to do with it? What's the process you go through?
Well, I think the main thing is like the amount of light that we need in a building. That's before the amount of pixels, because with the pixels, those are, forgiving. And, come on, he wants to have a piece of my omelet, So, I mean, the most important thing is the amount of light. It's because,
Yes.
you know, like when you look at the projection, and then, you know, for people that would like to explore that, you know, even professionals, you know, like you turn a projector on onto a surface, and then let's say that you start at the sunset time, and, you know, the sun is going down, and then you have, you know, darkness and the light is coming up. You know, the first thing that you're going to see is black and white, you know, so before you see any color, you're going to see, you know, shapes and texture and stuff like that. And then, you know, when you have the brightness over darkness, you know, then the next thing you're going to see something like, well, the wall is kind of soaked with ink. So before you see the effect of projection, you're going to experience something like maybe the wall is colored, you know. And then when you, again, you know, get more, you know, absence of light, and then more color and light on the wall, then you're going to start seeing a projection. And then at some point, you're going to experience something like in a movie theater, you know, where you see a projected picture. But, you know, what I love is with the current technologies that we go a step further, which then starts creating an experience of actually the wall emitting the light.
Yes.
You know? And then you
Yeah.
can actually, you can experience this, play this with a projector, you know, just like I said, you know, like playing with the light, you know, levels. And then once the effect is like the wall is emitting the light, then it starts going towards like, it's not a projection. And then, you know, a number of times when we do projects like Shogyamujo or Światowid, you know, we have a level of like, you know, probably Światowid is like 800 lux. You know, at that point you start questioning, like, it's not a projection anymore, this is like a screen, you know, or something like that.
Yeah, so the building becomes its own light source, like a
Yeah. It's lovely. It's expensive too, you know, to do that, you know, but
yeah, I do have some sense of that. And the so and the form of the building itself, I mean, all the detail of the building must suggest to you what you're going to do with the content in some way.
I mean, you know, my favorite buildings are the ones that have sort of like half complex architecture and half like flat walls. And we can express a lot of, you know, things that relate to like what people know, you know, what people would like to see on the screens, and still give us enough room around to play with, you know, framing and creating backgrounds and transforming the architecture. The challenging ones are that don't have flat surfaces. There's just like a lot of busy architecture. Um, well, if I did a project, you know, like in our studio, that would be my favorite project to do. But like working for the clients, they sort of tend a lot of the times, you know, like let's say working for Universal Studios or Disney, you know, they want to see their characters the way they are used to seeing them on a screen. So translating, you know, that image into the, you know, busy architecture is challenging, definitely. You know?
Yeah, I understand that. That get very complex, I imagine. Is a lot of that done just with pure horsepower in terms of the amount of light you have to put on it to overcome the textures of the building?
Well, again, you know, I'm not sure, you know, what kind of audience we have, you know, but like we can start talking about designing for specific point of view or multiple points of view. Like what happens with projection mapping is like a lot of those cool projects where you see a building facade, even though it's complex, but then there's an audience point of view. We can create some kind of magic, you know, we can trick, you know, the eye into like believing that they're like floating objects in front of the building, you know, there's something like diving or like disappearing inside of the building. I mean, there's a lot. I mean, we just went through like an 8-week long class, and then we worked with a very simple object, which is a cube, and we had like close to 70 participants. And then I observed the process of like how long it takes people to wrap their head around of like, it's a big difference, you know, designing something for a screen and designing something for an object that you walk around, you know. All of a sudden, all of the laws that you had, I remember so many times it's like when you work with film and then you want to express, you know, something like a snow, you know, during the winter, you know, you would like to have multiple planes, you know, you would like to have, I'm going to abstract here, you know, but like you would like to have small snowflakes in the background and a big snowflake in the foreground to sort of like focus your eye onto like, here's how the snow looks for screen. This is like great, but like when you do this on a building, all of a sudden you have an effect of like spotlight. you know, that snowflake becomes a source of light that is lighting the building, and it's totally, you know, ruining the effect that you want it to have, you know.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, because in conventional television and film, the design language has been evolved over so many years that there are kind of established techniques for doing things. How much, and we'll come on to your classes later on, I guess, but just in terms of, I would imagine there's still lots of scope for new creativity in this very open format. Are people still learning and developing new ways to come up with new effects and new visual tricks?
Every time, because, like, you know, like what's happening now is that, you know, that there's more and more software available. So like, well, you know, like you go from projection mapping into like augmented reality, artificial intelligence, you know, interactivity, and then in each one of those areas, you know, you can subdivide, and then you can, you know, and then you can combine them all too, you know, which I don't know, I think it's wonderful. But you know, the for everybody that is jumping into this, you know, now, like what makes our work easy in a way is that the surprise level of our work, it's really, really high, because like we work with large scale. And then, you know, a lot of the times, you know, we would just start a project, you know, set up the projectors and then turn them on, and then all that happens is, like, you know, Christie, Panasonic, most of these units display blue light. And then when you throw blue light, you know, 10 floors high, you know, people start walking around and going like, oh my God, what's going on? It's like, so
Yeah.
you don't really have to do anything
Too
to
much.
excite people, you know, when you work with large scale.
Yes, I understand that. But then when you start to really add your skill and your creativity to it, that's when you take them on a, you know, on an amazing journey. Some of the work, pretty much all the work we do and I've done over the years has been in kind of unconventional formats. So I understand there are lots of things you can do with playing with perspective, viewing positions, and creating artificial depth through lots of kind of visual techniques. I guess that's a main part of your toolbox, is it?
Yes, you know, I mean, there's this moment when when you get the right amount of light, you know, you sort of for the audience experience, what happens is that they start seeing the design projected on the building more than the building itself. You know, and this is when things start getting interesting, because like in a theater or like with a, you know, magician stage, it really takes these guys a lot to fake, you know, because they deal with physical reality, you know, engineering, all of that stuff, you know. And then for us, it's just like switching pixels, you know, so we can turn things upside down in the matter of a second, and we can keep doing this to like a point where actually, you know, a lot of the times we have to kind of back off and then look at what we're doing and think like, you know, that's too much, you know, we need to like pull things down, especially like when you, a lot of the work that we have done for movie premieres, you know, that's all about the stars and the guests having the private time, having a drink, discussing, you know, whatever they want to discuss, but they are basically celebrating that moment of a movie premiere. So like all of our projections for those moments are really carefully designed to be in a background, being interesting enough for people to kind of like wow them, but at the same time, like, you know, there's this thing with like streaming videos always pull attention away. Like when there's like a screen around, you know, there's always like, oh, I don't want to miss that moment, you know, so I keep looking at it. But what we do for the movie premieres is the opposite. We don't want people to be like that. We want them to be like calm, you know, having fun, but in the same time, like, what's the balance of like creating that wowing environment and not pulling attention away from the audience, you know?
Yeah, that must be quite a difficult balance to achieve in that application. Then other projects, I guess you must be, you know, turn everything up to 11 and blow everybody away all through the whole journey. So must be interesting. I guess each project must be so different and unique that you're never really doing the same thing twice.
Yeah, you know, I mean, that's what I want. You know, it's like when I feel like I'm doing something I've done before, I stop and I think of like, how can I do it in a different way? And then I definitely push more and more for using, you know, the new 3D software, the way of like, you know, playing with light and shadow, you know, like enhancing that, you know, dimensionality. And I don't know, for me, you know, like when I worked with Christy like 10 years ago on a book about projection mapping, and then the marketing director asked me, what is, if I had to describe, you know, our work with one word, what would that word be? And then, you know, what I think it is transformation.
Yeah.
You know, that's what gives us, you know, an edge over a lot of different other technologies. Like we can really transform the spaces. And then, you know, what I love about projection is like, you know, when it's not on, it's not there. That's lovely, you know, because like you turn it on, it's there, you turn it off, it's not there. Like, for example, you know, the screens, LED walls, when you turn them off, they become those black pieces of hardware that it's like dead in the space, you know, which is, there's nothing wrong with that, because like an LED wall designer will say the opposite, will say like, we'll just keep it on 24 hours a day and you never have this problem of like, you know, the wall being dead.
Yeah. So, I mean, I can imagine you've worked on hundreds of projects then over the years. Do you have a favorite or some favorites that stand out for you?
Many favorite projects, you know, I can probably keep talking about this for like days, you know, because, you know, I don't know where to start to talk about it, but for, you know, when once you start going into the large scale, like, you know, working on an event for the Pope with 2.5 million people, that on itself, you know, living with this kind of event for like a month becomes like a life transforming event, you know. I mean, you know, going from like the logistics, you know, through the military that is there, you know, through like all the companies that build structures, you know, to 2.5 million event, it's like huge. And then working with Coldplay, you know, and then delivering something for people that are absolutely like, I mean, they can't accept anything less than 100%, you know. So you got to shoot for like 110%, you know, to deliver that 100%. And then working with Universal Studios, and then, you know, that was probably like 5 years ago when I learned about the Optimus Prime project, which is a 20 feet tall robot, transforms between, you know, a truck to like, you know, a fully functioning robot that goes back. And then we're asked to create a projection layer on top of that robot. And then, you know, every friend from the industry, you know, I'm connected with pretty much, you know, every owner of every company that makes some hardware or software for, you know, our industry. And then all of them telling me that like, don't take this job because, you know, we're not ready with the technology for it. Or getting an assignment in India for 100 projector large scale show that needs to be happening over the weekend. So like today's Saturday, and then I'm talking to the client and they say like, a week from now, we would love to have this display. And then frankly speaking, you know, the display is the size of the Beijing Olympic opening, which took them probably a couple of years to design and produce. And then we're doing this next weekend.
And you say yes, yes to that?
I said yes. And then most of everybody told me like, Bart, you are crazy. You're going to burn yourself. Like, don't say yes. And I said yes already, you know, so. But, you know, when I started calling friends, you know, all of a sudden there's Scott from New Zealand that says like, well, I'm sitting on a bunch of equipment and I am ready to deploy, you know. Yeah. And then the conversation about the budget took about 5 minutes, you know. And, you know, like we're talking about millions of dollars, you know. And it's like, boom, and it goes. And it's like, the only way I could do that is after, you know, 30 years of going through the, how do you call them, through the trenches, yes, like.
Yeah, I totally understand that. So does anything scare you then anymore? Has there been any recent projects you've kind of said yes, but wish right after you probably should have said no, but still pulled it off?
I don't think there's anything like that, because like, you know, the wonderful thing after working for, you know, about 15 years with companies like Disney and Universal Studios is that, you know, the basic philosophy of all of those companies is that you never say no. You know, so you train your mind to always like, yes, but, you know, yes, I can put that, you know, 1,000 feet tall mast, but I need to dig into the ground another 1,000 feet, or, you know, whatever that is. You keep training your mind to, yes and how, yes and how.
Yeah.
So um,
I think that is the point, isn't it? It is the how. The real question is, yes, I'm sure it can be done. I did a blooloop session a couple of years ago where I said, yeah, we're in the future. We're in the future, so everything's possible. Robots, artificial intelligence, all these things exist. So yes, of course it's possible somehow, and that's the real question, how? And that's where your expertise comes in, knowing either how or who is going to know how, which is to your network of people in the industry, I guess, that you might call on to help you solve the times you say.
I think that, like a good advice for everybody who is listening right now that is interested in like the visual design work in a space is that, the good thing for us is the brain has a capacity to fill in missing parts. So once you figure out, how that works, you don't really have to deliver everything on a spec. Like whatever the engineer would think like that has to be done that way, that's not true, because the brain can't really, it's about, 30% of the visual information that is missing can be added by the brain itself. And then actually, it doesn't happen in the audio world. So like that kind of is a challenge for the audio engineers and then, audio designers, is that like in the audio world, you really need to deliver that experience, in a certain way, like cannot have missing parts. But the good thing with the visual design is that, there's a lot of room for like, for example, you want to project text, information on a building that is readable, yes, and then the building has a lot of windows. So if the text is static, you will have a hard time reading that, but once you start moving that text, the text is going to break up over the windows and balconies, but the brain will start, seeing it as flat, and that's, when you start pay attention to, how that works. I mean, we pushed, that Optimus Prime, when you start analyzing it and we sit down and we look at it and I explain to you like how things are done, that totally doesn't make sense from the point of like physics. We have done things like light reflection delays. I mean, when you pass light source, across the surface, there's no delay. I mean, light just reflects, back from, but like when you start playing with like delaying light effects, all of a sudden you start adding dimensionality, and it's like creates the psychological effect as there's space, and even though there's no space. And then I don't know how much sense I'm making right now, but like,
what you're certainly for me, what you're doing is opening up my mind to just thinking about it in a new way, which is what you've had to do with a formatless format, if there's such a thing. I know, I do understand that, and the point you were making about audio earlier, how important is the audio versus the video? I mean, people have a view of that in experiences and in cinema. Do you have a weighting, or is it not that straightforward?
I would say my favorite ratio would be half and half.
Okay.
I have a friend, Mike Patterson, that is teaching. He's an amazing, designer, artist. He's teaching at USC a class. Forget the name of it, but it's called like half and half, music and visual design.
Yeah.
And that's kind of wonderful because, like, me growing up as a musician, the music can tell story on its own. I mean, you can close your eyes and listen to wonderful music and have an experience, without the visual part. Now, if we had a way of doing them half and half, I mean, wouldn't that be wonderful?
Yeah,
I think so. But honestly, like in my experience and work, the sound element is always like, it's not taken so seriously. Like in my the last 10 years, I can only think of 2 times when I had a sound experience where I pay attention to like, oh my God, the sound design in the space.
Okay.
And then, okay, movie theater and then Dolby system and all of those systems, this is all great, but this is like, it's not so interesting to me because I think we talked about it before. This is like one format. It's a screen and a surround system. So I'm always going to the same box. Of course, seeing, you know, wonderful work of amazing artists from around the world. It's sort of not being in a standard kind of space. But then when I am walking around a warehouse and there's like, let's say, you know, 20 different sound systems, and they're all, you know, connected together and designed to be like the sound experience that you walk through. That's wonderful. And I think now when we talk about it, like, you know, having that extra time during the COVID, you know, virus, I started building my sound studio in my house. So maybe I'll get more into this kind of work, designing sound, you know.
Mm. Yeah, I from my own experience, I know there's so much that can be done with sound. An experience I had was at Futuroscope in France. They had an experience for the blind where you were guided around by a blind person in a completely black space, and it was only sound and touch that gave you that experience. But I got more from that experience than some of the amazing pixel-based experiences I've been involved in. So no, I totally agree, and probably I think that sound design is coming through a kind of new renaissance with technologies enabling ever more complex designs and mixing and movement of sound too. So I guess there's more to come there. And I'm going to end up perhaps with a few questions about where you think the future is. But in the meantime, I know you're a busy man. I know you've got many things on, but one of the things I'm particularly interested in and would like to learn a bit more about is it the Hako project? This,
yeah.
Tell us about it rather than me trying to interpret it wrongly.
Well, you know, for many years, people, colleagues, you know, from the industry were asking me about sharing my knowledge with a larger group. And then, you know, I have been like really selfish and thinking, since I think that, well, you know, I always wanted to work with like, you know, 4, 5, 6 people that are like best in the world, you know, most skilled, like being very selective. And then, you know, now things kind of slowed down. We lost a lot of work. So I started thinking of like other things to do. And I thought like, you know, there's a way to teach people the first step, because, you know, we don't have to go like super deep, but we kind of went deep anyway. But, you know, then I thought like the first step in projection mapping when we talk about objects would be working with a cube. And then when you look at our, you know, I don't know if industry is the right word, but but it's like, you know, what happened in the 2004 when projection mapping, you know, happened, and then different companies started, you know, doing projects, you know, projecting on the facades. What happened was that there was a certain kind of language that was developed. And then till today, people think that that language means projection mapping, which to me is totally not true, because I don't need to have, you know, architecture spinning around in order to do my work. You know, there's like spinning cubes, spinning architecture, blowing things, you know, things crumbling down. I mean, you look at, you know, most of the projects out there and they all have this sort of similar elements. So then when I thought like, yeah, you know, cube is the basic element to start with, but then I thought like, I don't want to have just a cube like a cube, you know, so we sort of made the cube to be like really unique, you know, it's skewed. And then we send a message out there through, you know, all of the different networks, different friends that we have. And then we end up having close to 70 participants. And, you know, at first I thought like, I really want this class to be about the design, you know, so I was actually thinking that there are going to be like 100 art students showing up. And then what happened was that there were less than 100, but, you know, half of them are like technologists and half of them are the designers, you know. And then I sort of like, last year I would just go through editing process and cut everybody out that I did, you know, wouldn't be interested in working with. But this time I'm like, well, it's a hard time, you know, it's this virus, people are sitting at home. But then I started looking through the names and there's like, whoa, this guy used to be a technical director for Cirque du Soleil, you know, and then, wow, there are 2 people from, you know, set designers from the Sydney Opera. So I'm like, I just couldn't say no to them, you know. So then we started figuring out how can we work with all of them, you know. And then I realized, well, at the beginning, the classes were like projection history, projection mapping history, you know, like sketching, designing, animating, you know, and then later technical parts like rendering, programming. So I thought people that are really technical are going to really enjoy seeing the creative process, and then people that are artistic are going to take advantage of the technical people and ask them for help with the you know, programming and stuff. So it ended up being this really wonderful you know, course. And then I realized now we have a digital factory. We all of a sudden, you know, without thinking, created a digital factory. And now we started talking to people like offering this course like Hako for life, because like all of them bonded so much together that, you know, it's hard to think of like ending that, you know. And there are opportunities around the world, you know, there are festivals, there are, you know, shows, there are, you know, all kinds of different unique, you know, situations where we can present the Hako. And then we pretty much, Martin, you have like people from every time zone, you know, in the class. So you have people, you know, that join from Europe, from Arabic countries, from Asia, from, you know, Australia, New Zealand. So now it kind of seems like wherever, you know, there's an opportunity around the world, there's going to be a team member that can jump in and like support. And then there's something that we didn't talk, you know, yet on this call, which, you know, if I can switch the subject, you know, back in March, you know, I have realized, well, something, you know, my family goes back to like my grandparents grew up during this First World War, my parents around the Second World War. And then I grew up as a serious kid, you know, it took me a long time to learn jokes, you know, life was serious, you know, it was just like that. But what that gave me is that in March, you know, when the first news here in the States, I started hearing about this virus. First week of March, I told everybody to go home, take anything you want from the studio, and then set up, you know, your workplace at home. And then in the first week of March, you can go through, you know, some online articles. You know, we released an article discussing using masks as a safety, you know, element. And then we talk about creating masks, designers masks, you know, making them look fun, you know, making them look, you know, friendly and stuff like this. So that is the first week of March in our studio. And then from the beginning of April, we started using UVC lights, which are the same lights that are used in surgical rooms.
Yeah.
So we spent, you know, the last half a year really mainly focused on safety. And then we have done a number of projects, you know, we tested remote techniques. So now when we're talking about setting up projection mapping, my first thing to do would be like, how can we do this remotely? And as a good example of that is in Area 15, 95% of alignment work was done through Panasonic robotic cameras and, you know, fiber optic cables. We set up a mobile studio outside of the venue, and we didn't even like work inside. So, I mean, you know, we've been practicing that. And then, okay, for the folks that like want the life to come back and be together, you know, this is kind of like sad news what we're doing, but in the same time, I think that this is like really practical and good approach to like how much of the work can we do without, you know, the human contact, you know.
Yeah, we're seeing, aren't we, all of us, but in kind of industry specific solutions for carrying on doing one's work with the challenges of restricted travel and, you know, harder to work closer with each other. Some of these practical solutions, but yeah, we're seeing technology solutions. Not necessarily being invented because they've been around, but really being implemented fully and comprehensively. Zoom's an example that many people refer to. Finally, people are video conferencing after all these years. I think you're right. We're seeing the idea of remote working being implemented using tools that exist, but being implemented because they have to now, but then becoming the norm. So I think, yeah, that's a good example, Area 15, that you kind of had to, but it's another example where you've kind of said, yes, we'll solve the problem, find a solution and put it in. Do you think that's going to continue into the future, the tools that you've developed for remote alignment?
Yeah, I love that stuff, because like, another example of what we have done is like there's a software from actually created by my good friends, for the last 30 years. Pixie Lab, that company from Sweden created a software called Blocks. And then they, in their mind, that software was created for museum environments. And then, when you think about a museum, it's like a large single physical location. And then we have taken their software and then connected 4 locations around the world. So we sort of like, used the internet technology and the networks to do that. And all of a sudden, we created scenarios like, I have a demo installation in my living room. I have 3 6,000 lumen Epson projectors. It's kind of nice because 18,000 lumens in a living room at a price of 750 watts. It's like, it's pretty amazing. And then we connected my living room to our studios in Poland and Japan. And then I put a couple cameras, and then my team projection mapped, my whole living room remotely, using Pixie Lab software. And then they can, well, I don't want to spend too much time talking about Pixie Lab, because for anybody who is interested in it, there are a lot of like nice videos online that you can, see what you can do. But basically every internet device, projector, tablet, laptop becomes like could be a display or remote control. So all of a sudden we create a bunch of control devices around the world, and then this displays, and then we're having fun doing that. And then, again, for people, that are tuning in and then, they sort of want to learn more about projection mapping and stuff like that. It's like when you do projection mapping, you're sort of like doing 2 things, there's the real space, and then, what's inside of the software, the video server software, you can call it a digital twin. Basically what that means is that you're dealing with 2 worlds. One is physical and one is virtual. And then once you align them both, the design inside of the video software is being pumped onto the physical space, and then that's how it works. So like for me, remote work, it doesn't matter because we already are working with a digital twin. So if this digital twin is here, or if it's somewhere else, it doesn't really matter because we can have a control of it over the network. So that's kind of cool.
It is, and I guess if you combine that with your sort of worldwide, across all time zones network of new trainees, new people coming on board, you've got far more horsepower and resources to do far more.
Actually, here's one more thing, for our viewers, because we just saw a really nice thing with our Hako, class is that for the first time ever, we connected people from companies that normally would compete. Yes. So part of our network are people from Christie, from Panasonic, from Epson, from Dataton, from, there's Pixie, Pixera. It's just like, in my normal life, last year, if I went to a trade show, I would kind of visit, each one of those companies respectfully, and not to say that I just came back from Panasonic. All of us in this, industry would know that it's like, we're just, mindful of each other. It's like, but like for the first time ever, we have these kind of competing companies part of our, network. And then what happened was that Christie was so nice. Their engineers developed, they didn't develop a new technology, but basically they took their video server, they set up some widgets, and then our students are able to upload a file to a cloud. And that file is being automatically displayed, on a Hako box. And then there's a camera, so you can automatically see it. So it's kind of nice. It's just like all automated,
That's the future, isn't it?
I'm having a really hard time, with one thing that I spent the last half a year really pushing for, our industry to be back, and then we came up with so many solutions of how to really do things safely. You know, we really have them, and I have the answers for it. And what I'm thinking about is like, you know, let's be creative. And then like, when I started sharing with you that, you know, as a job of a designer today, I think that, you know, my first thing is to like work around parameters and then look at the safety. You know, think of like a park. And then we put, you know, tables, and then we create like a picnic kind of, you know, situation, you know, barbecue and stuff like this. And we put people not 6 feet apart, we put them 10 feet, 10 meters away. So then you have this wonderful setting, you know, where tables are on the park, and then entertainment, you know, it's coming to you on an electrical stage. So you have a small platform with a clown, with a comedian, with a jazz musician that kind of roam around the park. And then we flip the situation. So instead of having a static stage and people roaming around, which is not safe, we ask people, we invite them to sit down and not move around, and the entertainment moves around. It's like, you know, I see everything being sort of like approached that way, because like seeing a concert, which is a driving movie theater where people sit in cars, makes me sad. You know, this is like a lesser version of the past. But when we flip things upside down, when we kind of look at them in a different way, we can create curiosity, we can create fun. And it's like, I'm really having a hard time connecting with like, so I'm happy to speaking here on a public, you know, open platform about that, because maybe I will be able to connect with people that think alike me. That's kind of hard time I'm having with. It's like, you know, I spent like 3 months talking to people about masks, and it started in March. And honestly, it was just people didn't really know what I was talking about. Today, everybody's, you know, wearing masks and stuff like this. But frankly, I got tired of it. I just like, I stopped talking about it 3 months ago, you know? And the same thing with UVC lights. It's like, I use them for my facilities. I mean, you put a tripod with a UVC light inside of any place, and then in a matter of minutes, everything is fully disinfected. And it's like, if you wanted to do the same thing with sprays or wipes, it will take you, you know, hours. So I really would love, you know, our community to come together and start talking about solutions. Because like, look at that, another thing. How many friends do I have that own giant warehouses with furnitures? I mean, in our industry, what's happening is that every time you do a custom party, people build, design custom furnitures, and then they spend the rest of their life in a warehouse, never being used. But still, the designers don't want to throw them away because it's, you know, wonderful, expensive, you know, furniture. Let's take them outside, you know, create those outdoor restaurants, and then, you know, decorate them and make them wonderful. It's like, these furnitures will never see their life outdoor, you know, but they're sitting there. It's just, all it takes is we need to like sort of connect and start talking about that, you know.
I agree with you, Bart, and I also agree. I think our industry, as much as any other, maybe more than any other, has a huge breadth and depth of creative talent that will solve that problem. And I think the example you gave of people spread out, staying still, and have the entertainment come to them through them in many different ways. Yes, of course that's going to happen, because between us, we'll create it. And I think that's the great thing of having events like this virtually. Probably more people will be talking about it through these virtual events than if you and I were at the table at a conventional exhibition together. So I'm an eternal optimist by nature, but I think, and I've seen, this isn't the only conversation I've had about our industry solving problems in completely new ways. And I know one of the presentation sessions as part of this V-Expo is going to cover that more specifically. But yeah, absolutely. You, Bart, please carry on waving that flag. And I know there'll be others jumping on the same mission, because I think, and what it will do, I'm sure, is create a whole new form of entertainment, a format, again, an unformat this format of how we entertain each other into the future. So yeah, my optimism, I'm holding tight to that, because I do think with skillful creative people like you, that will say yes. Bart, solve the problem. Yes, Martin, I will. I mean, that's got to be the step, hasn't it? So I'm sure you will. I hope you do, and I look forward to it. I'd love to be part of one of those journeys with you one day too. Let's see if we can make that happen. And thank you for sharing, and thank you for sharing so honestly and openly and emotively, because these are definitely emotive times too. Congratulations on your amazing 30 and more year journey, and yeah, keep saying yes, keep doing more, and I look forward to seeing you again soon.
Martin, thank you so much. Really pleasure talking to you and meeting you. And well, sending all of my love to everybody, you know, like just like let's pull this together. Let's be smart, and then totally if you have any, well, if you're serious about doing something big and you have any questions, call me up, because I have, you know, a lot of answers. You know?
A big love all round, right?
Thank you. Big
Thanks,
hug
Bart.
to everybody.
Yeah.
Big hug.